Tonight's speaker is the Executive Director of the Karen Beasley Sea Turtle Rescue and Rehabilitation Center, whose mission is to rescue, rehabilitate, and release sick and injured sea turtles. Previously, she was the President and Executive Director of the National Marine Life Center in Massachusetts. This has led the Stranding Department at the Marine Mammal Center in Tuscaloosa, California, and served as Program Manager for the Georgia Coastal Management Program. Kathy's volunteered for a variety of marine animal projects and associations in Massachusetts, California, Georgia, Hawaii, and North Carolina. And as a member of the International Sea Turtle Society, has served on several nonprofit boards, educational advisory committees, and other civic services in multiple states. Joining us tonight from Surf City, North Carolina, please join me in welcoming Kathy Zagzebski.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris. And thank you, everyone, for having me with you tonight. It's very exciting to speak with you, and I love seeing all your trips. That's really great. And
come join us on one.
yes, I've been in way too long. I'll have to do that. I was kind of looking at them. I'm like, maybe this is the time to renew my certification. And definitely for you, when you all come to North Carolina, you should swing down and visit us at the Karen Beasley Sea Turtle Center. So what I'd like to do today or this evening is I'm going to briefly introduce the center and talk to you a little bit more about the various species of sea turtles that we have here in North Carolina. And I loved hearing some of your sea turtle experiences. That was a lot of fun. You have these same turtles up in Virginia as well. We'll talk a little bit about the life cycle and natural history of sea turtles, and about their nesting in particular in North Carolina, as well as what we do with our beach program, the Topsail Turtle Project. Talk about why they strand and why they come to our Sea Turtle Hospital. And then, although I feel like I might be preaching to the choir, we'll talk about why sea turtles matter, in my mind at least. So the Karen Beasley Sea Turtle Center has a multifold mission, and the core is to protect and conserve all species of marine turtles in the water and on the beach. And we do that through our beach monitoring program, where we identify and protect nesting female turtles, their nests, and their hatchlings. We also do that through our Sea Turtle Hospital, where we rescue, rehabilitate, and release sick and injured sea turtles. We do that through our education programs and through our hands-on internships. And if any of you have young people in your life who are interested in maybe pursuing this as a career or just exploring this area, we offer senior internships for college students and recent graduates, and that is a summer-long or semester-long experience. We also have those in the spring and the fall. And for younger students in high school, we offer a 2-week exploratory junior internship. And information for that is on our website. Oops. I am going the wrong way. Here we go. So after 3 years, I still don't know how to do this on Zoom, right? And so we have a very long history. We are celebrating this year. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary, which is really exciting. We've had a number of events, and as we move into fall, we'll probably have some online events, so you can keep an eye on our Facebook page for that schedule. But we were officially founded in 1998 or incorporated in 1998, we existed as a volunteer effort for many years prior. And this was with our founder, Jean Beasley, and her then 8-year-old daughter, Karen. We were inspired when a sea turtle happened to nest behind their beach home. They were visiting Topsail Island from Ohio, and they saw a sea turtle nest, and Karen and Jean stayed up the entire night And then the next day they tried to tell somebody about it and find out, what they could do to help protect that nest. They were told there aren't any sea turtles on Topsail Island. And they went on to prove that wrong. At the time, all they could think of to do was to erase the tracks so that no humans would find and dig up the nest. Over the next few years and over the next couple decades, these two became known as the mother-daughter turtle team. And eventually they recruited other volunteers to help and formed an informal volunteer group called the Topsail Turtle Project. Karen unfortunately passed away at a young age and asked her family to do something for the turtles. And a few years later, a turtle called Lucky came into Jean's hands and the hands of the Topsail Turtle Project. And Jean, they all realized that there wasn't any local sea turtle hospital to take care of this turtle. So that inspired them to build a sea turtle hospital. And we opened our first hospital in Topsail Beach, which is the south end of the barrier island, right offshore of Surf City. And we're there for a number of years. We quickly outgrew the space, kind of had tanks almost on top of each other. And in 2013, we moved to our current location on the Surf City mainland. And we went from a 900 square foot facility to 13,000 square feet. So we now have a lot of good space for sea turtles. But getting into the sea turtles themselves now, sea turtles are all a threatened and endangered species. So it really is special to see them in the wild like many of you have. There are 7 species worldwide. Sea turtles are reptiles. They are air breathing, so they do need to come to the surface to breathe. They don't have gills like fish do. They lay eggs, and they are laying eggs right now in North Carolina and even up into Virginia. They breed in tropical areas like where we are and farther south, and they're cold-blooded. So here in North Carolina and up there in Virginia, we have 5 species of sea turtles that inhabit our waters. So the loggerhead is soon to become North Carolina's state marine reptile. It is a medium-sized turtle. It can get to be up to about 350 pounds. Its lifespan is estimated at 70 to 80 years. There are a lot of estimations in here, and a lot of that is because the science of studying sea turtles is really only a few decades old. These are animals that a lot of people don't know very much about, although we do have that wonderful opportunity when they come ashore to nest. These turtles don't reach sexual maturity until age 35, but then they can continue to lay eggs and have hatchlings for the rest of their lives. These turtles, they're named loggerhead because they've got a giant neck. They really like whelks and conchs and other types of marine invertebrates. They also like crabs, and here at the hospital they'll eat fish and a lot of other things. They are found throughout the world's ocean, and they are threatened. Some populations are endangered. Here in North Carolina, they're the primary species that we see nesting, and we also regularly see them stranding in North Carolina. So green turtles, this is the 2nd largest sea turtle. And it's easy for me to forget that, for one, because we usually see them as juveniles at the hospital. So, they're really only about this big. But in the wild, they can get to be up to 400 pounds as an adult. And there's even some record breaking turtles, green turtles, that made it to 700 pounds. I think they may have been overfed in an aquarium or something. Their lifespan is also estimated at 70 to 80 years, probably more, and sexual maturity about 25 to 35. And these turtles are really interesting. They're called green turtles, but you've probably seen these on dives if you've seen a sea turtle. They don't, they're external, their shell's not green. They don't look green on the outside, but they're actually green on the inside. So these turtles as juveniles are omnivores. They eat both fish and seagrasses and seaweed and algae. But as they grow into be an adult, they exclusively turn into herbivores. So they'll eat seagrass, algae, and any kind of plankton in the waters. So it actually tinges their fat green. These turtles are threatened throughout their range, and some populations are endangered. And we do see a few of them nesting every year in North Carolina, and they also are the most frequent turtle right now that strands in our state. And the Kemp's Ridley, this is the smallest of the sea turtles. And as an adult, it only gets to be about 100 pounds. It is shorter lifespan, estimated about 30 years, maybe probably more, but they reach sexual maturity a little bit younger, about 13 to 14. These turtles really like crabs, and they'll also eat other fish, jellyfish, mollusks. They're pretty good at finding food. Their distribution is throughout the East Coast of the US. And unlike the other turtles, they really nest individually on the beach. They'll come ashore in the middle of the night usually. Kemp's Ridley's nest, they have a different strategy. They nest in a whole group of turtles. They'll gather offshore at their nesting grounds, most commonly in northeastern Mexico at Rancho Nuevo. And they're at some unknown signal, somebody, somehow they signal, and they all go ashore at once. So kind of the safety in numbers strategy. We do occasionally see them nesting here in North Carolina, and they are one of our 3 most common turtles to strand in North Carolina. The leatherback, if you've seen these, you're very lucky. I've only seen one once from a whale watch boat, but this is the largest of the sea turtles. They can get to be over 1,000 pounds. Some are over 2,000, so up to a ton. Their lifespan is shorter than the hard-shelled turtles, so it's about 50 years. And these turtles really like to eat jellyfish, salps, other types of soft-bodied animals. So it does mean that they're particularly vulnerable to things like plastic bags that look like jellyfish. Their distribution is worldwide, and these turtles have so many really amazing features, but their shell is not hard like most turtles that you think of, and like the other turtles that I presented. It's really more leathery, and it sounds like I'm repeating myself when I say their shell is kind of leathery, but it actually is. They are critically endangered. They very, very rarely nest in North Carolina, and thankfully this 1,000-pound turtle rarely strands in North Carolina, because I don't know how many. It would be hard pressed. We'd be hard pressed to take care of it. They're found usually offshore. Sometimes we see them here from the piers, like when the jellyfish are running closer to shore. The hawksbill turtle is the 5th species that we see regularly in our mid-Atlantic area. It's a medium-sized turtle, about up to 150 pounds. And these are what you're going to see a lot if you're diving the coral reefs. They tend to hang out more in tropical areas, and they have a very pointed beak, unlike the other turtles. And so that helps them get into like the crevices of the coral. They love to eat sponges and other invertebrates, and that beak helps them get those sponges. They are endangered, and we've only had a few of them documented in our state. Because there are only 7 species, I'm going to tell you the other 2. There's the olive ridley. This is the Kemp's Ridley's cousin, only it's exclusively in the Pacific Ocean. And they also nest in arybatas. And then the flatback, this turtle is basically only found in Australia. And it's a very unusual species. I hope to see it one day, and maybe some of you have. All right. So I want to go through the sea turtle life cycle, especially because right now we are in the middle of nesting season. And so it's kind of neat to think about what's going on offshore. We see the part of it that's onshore, but we don't see offshore. So sea turtles, basically, as we talked about, they become sexually mature, able to have young between 11 and 40 years. And most of the rest of the time, the juveniles and the adults are spent feeding. I mean, what more can you ask for? They have to continue to feed in order to survive. As they get to be older, adult males and females will migrate towards the area where they hatched. So most turtles go in the general region of the same beach that they hatched on. And the migration, turtles might migrate thousands of kilometers. The leatherback has the longest migration. They'll mate offshore, and females can mate with a number of different males, and they can store the sperm and fertilize several clutches of eggs that they'll lay during the nesting season. And then the males, their job is done. They get to return to the feeding area. And then the mama turtles really kind of come into play. So the females will usually nest at night. They'll lay up to 7 clutches of eggs each nesting season. In our area, it tends to be 3 to 5 clutches. So this kind of depends on how long your summer is, for example. The females will use their giant rear flippers to dig a pit, and the pit is kind of shaped like a light bulb, or like old-fashioned light bulbs now. So it's a very stable structure. They'll lay between 50 and 130 eggs, and then they use their front flippers to kind of help fill in the nest and help camouflage it by scooping sand over the whole area. And then they fertilize the next batch of eggs, and they do it all over again. So as I mentioned, in North Carolina, we see nesting usually from the same female 3 to 5 times, and a female loggerhead, a mama turtle, will come back every 2 to 3 years. So after she lays her nest, she goes back to the ocean. So her job is done. Well, it's not really, because she's got to come back a few more times. So she never actually sees her hatchlings, but she has done an amazing job at creating a very safe and protected habitat. And then it's up to volunteer groups like ours to make sure that nest is protected and the hatchlings have their best chance for survival. So an egg will hatch about after 7 to 12 weeks. And in our area, it's about 60 days, give or take. And the temperature at which that turtle incubates is the temperature determines whether or not that turtle will turn into a male or a female turtle. So cooler temperatures, cool dudes and hot mamas, if you will. So cooler temperatures develop into males, and warmer temperatures develop into females. So as you can imagine, actually the population impacts of climate change are really of serious concern. There was a lot of press, particularly last year, about scientists and turtle conservationists who do a lot of beach work. We're finding that a large percentage of the nests in Florida were mostly female or exclusively female. So it's really, the population needs both. So when the hatchlings emerge, usually it's at night. They'll kind of work their way up through the nest toward the surface. They'll emerge at night, ideally. Sometimes they emerge during the day, and that's a whole nother problem. But they orient towards the lowest and the brightest light. And usually that's either the moon or it's the moon's reflection on the surf. So even on a dark night, or even in a part of the world where the moon isn't rising over the ocean, it still tends to be that brightest light that attracts those hatchlings. And then once they're in the water, their job is to swim, and they go into like this post hatchling swimming frenzy, and they just swim until they get offshore. And what they're trying to do is they have a little bit of an egg sac, so that helps fuel them, and they're trying to get out past the predators to the Sargassum Sea, kind of in the middle of the ocean where there's a lot of sargassum seaweed. It's warmer waters, and it's a great place for them to just then relax for the next several years of their life. So they then enter a period called the lost years, anywhere from a couple to 10 years. We don't know much about them because they're in a part of the ocean that people don't see or find or study. But it's thought that they remain in the Sargassum Sea. There's plenty of food, there's plenty of places to hide, and they're pretty safe from predators. So as juveniles, then they move closer to shore. Their diet needs change. No longer zooplankton and plankton aren't really enough for them anymore. So they start to move closer to shore and feed on the near shore habitats and along the coastal plain. And that is the life cycle of a sea turtle. So here in North Carolina, we've got some great habitat, and we do have mostly loggerheads, with a few greens. We patrol our beaches looking for sea turtle nests or sea turtle tracks, and then we find the nest from May 1st through August 31st. So it is kind of a nearing the end of our patrolling season. On nests that are laid in August, now we monitor them for the next couple of months. So we might be sitting on nest sitting for as late as September, October. Occasionally we've been out at the nest near Thanksgiving, but that's usually a little bit too cold for the hatchlings. So we'll patrol our beaches, we'll look for tracks and locate the nest, which winds up being a lot harder than you would imagine, because that mama turtle is so good at hiding her actual nest. You see the tracks, but then there's a huge area that's just kind of our scientific name for it. Get this, is the messed up area. So when we see that messed up area, then we kind of look at and use our hands to probe to find the nest itself. Sometimes the nest is either well below the high tide line. Sometimes that's either a newer mom or one that maybe was scared back into the water or scared into nesting kind of in a not ideal place. Sometimes the nests are, up under a house or under a dock, under a walkway or boardwalk. So really in kind of a poor location. So if that happens, we will relocate the nest to a better location. And we're also collecting data. So our first goal is to protect the turtles. Our second goal is really to collect this really critical conservation data about what these turtles are doing. We also will collect one egg for a collaborative study that a scientist at University of Georgia is doing to look at the DNA. So, I mentioned that sea turtles in Georgia tend to come back every 2 to 3 years. We know that now because of this DNA study, where there actually are individually identified females. And we may never see the females. We may never see those mama turtles because they nested in the middle of the night. But when we get that egg from their nest and we identify them, we can see a family tree back on the scientist database for years. And it's really, really cool. There's a turtle that nested in one area that, or one section of beach had a grandmother, a mother, and a new, offspring. So it had 3 generations of sea turtles nesting as documented by the DNA. So that's just amazing to think about where these turtles are. When the nest is about to hatch, we'll educate the public. We'll build a ramp to smooth the walkway for the turtles, and then we'll wait for them to hatch. And then as they make their way to the ocean, we want them to walk on the beach because the hatchlings are really imprinting on the micromagnetic fields of that beach in order to come back to that general area. And this is what it looks like. Oops. This happened to be a hatch that occurred at dusk, so we were able to get pictures. Generally, no flash pictures. We don't want to have any lights, and we work with the community to try to make sure that there's no lights on in the houses, no street lights, anything like that, or that they're using turtle-friendly lighting. Those hatchlings from North Carolina, they have to swim 50 miles to get out to the Sargassum. So it is quite a long trek for them. After the nest hatches, then we will excavate that nest and continue to collect data. So when it's hatching, our main job is protecting the hatchlings and let them work their way to the ocean, keeping people away at a safe distance. When it hatches then, or after it hatches, we excavate the nest. We'll count any remaining shells in that nest. And then we will, if there are live hatchlings, we will bring them up and release them. And we also will count any hatchlings that didn't make it, or eggs that never hatched or that maybe weren't fertilized. And that's really a nice opportunity to educate the public as well. So last year, our total was 111. Over the last 5 years, our running average is about 85 nests per year, but the range is 53 to 189 nests here on the 26 miles of Topsail Island alone. So far, we've had 104 nests, so we're hoping for a few more before the season ends. So if you are anywhere at the beach, at any beach, anywhere in the world, during a time when sea turtles are nesting or hatching, there are a lot of great things that you can do to help as divers and spread the word amongst the people that you're diving with. But turn off the outdoor lights on the ocean side, and if possible, close and protect those drapes. Last summer, I had just kind of a really impactful experience. I knew that light impacted turtles, but this was a hatch I was at. It was pouring rain. It was lightning. The lightning didn't faze the turtles at all. But as they got halfway down towards the ocean, there was a street light, and we weren't quick enough in working with the utility company to turn it off, which they're very accommodating. But the nest hatched early, and as soon as the hatchlings got to that point, they made a U-turn towards that light. And so we're all working and holding towels behind them and trying to shade their way down to the ocean. And it was just so dramatic, you know, when there was a little one that I was working with, because the rest of the group was down by the water, and I had my towel and I'm kind of like shading the way. And I'm like, okay, he's safe now. I took my towel back, U-turn back towards the light. So it really, really was impressed in me how critical it is to keep those lights out. And as part of our 25th anniversary celebration, we actually have a program. So if you know anybody on Topsail Island, we are offering free turtle-friendly light bulbs. If you know anyone anywhere, I'm happy to give you information on where to buy turtle-friendly light bulbs. It's for your home. It's basically in the amber wavelengths. The turtles can't see or don't see well in these longer wavelengths, amber or red. But other things that you can do, fill in holes. It's really simple. You can have all the fun at the beach, but at the end of the day, fill in your holes. Remove all items from the beach, dispose of trash responsibly, and reduce, reuse, recycle. So that's the stranding side of what we do at the Karen Beasley Sea Turtle Center. And you probably thought that we were going to talk about why they strand, and now we are. So there are a number of different ways, reasons that turtles strand and come to our physical location, which is our Sea Turtle Hospital. There are one of the most frequent reasons, and the highest percentage of turtles that we get in any given year come because of something called cold stunning. And cold stunning is a form of severe hypothermia. And turtles, because they're reptiles and cold-blooded, they need to be in warm water. They would love that lake, except that's probably not salt water. But they need to be in water at least 70 to 75 degrees. And they start to have negative medical impacts if the water dips below 60. So in North Carolina, they would swim south, or some of them would swim offshore to warmer waters. But here, what we see is some of them, especially up in the Outer Banks area and also in the Cape Lookout area, there's just, those tend to be two hot spots or cold spots, if you will. The sea turtles just don't make it out in time often. They're up in the estuaries, they're eating and foraging, and then all of a sudden the water gets too cold. So they get colder and colder and colder, and they go eventually into a severe hypothermic shock, which is called cold stunning. This is not because it's happening over time, it's not a quick event. Basically, it can take weeks for them before they strand. And then it relies on somebody finding them, especially the park rangers at Cape Lookout for us. And then So they're, by the time they get to us, they're severely compromised, and we can't just warm them up and send them out. It's usually a minimum 3 months, and sometimes we've had turtles in our site, in our hospital, for over 2 years. But we warm them gradually. You also can't warm them quickly, so we warm them gradually over several days. We also, most get antibiotics. Some have additional wounds from being kind of tossed in the surf. And then even once they're better, sometimes they start developing secondary medical complications, like a form of osteoarthritis or a bone disease. But we can eventually get most of those turtles back out into the wild, and that's what makes it all worthwhile. We also see shark bite on occasion. It's not that often. Once turtle gets to be older, they're usually not subject to large predators like that. It's often if they're sick or if they're younger. This was a turtle that was stranded initially because of cold stunning. We released him a few days later. He perhaps wasn't as fit as he should have been, but he was bit by a shark. We released him again, and so far we haven't heard anything, which in our business is good news. And sometimes we just see general illness. This was a turtle that arrived thoroughly emaciated and covered in barnacles. And we were able to turn him around. It took weeks before he would even eat, months before he could swim well, and started to gain weight. And that's him being released back into the wild. We do see hooks and other human interaction. The hooking is generally on the angler's part. It's an inadvertent interaction. Kemp's Ridleys especially are suckers for a free meal. So they like those crabs that gather underneath the piers, feasting on discarded bait. They also seem to like the bait, unfortunately, and sometimes their meal comes, unfortunately, with a hook attached. So in North Carolina, in Florida, I think some places in Virginia are doing it as well. The general recommendation for a turtle that's caught either at the pier or on shore by an angler is to leave at least 2 feet of line. And because if you clip off that hook, but you can't get it out, the turtle's likely to swallow it, which creates a bigger problem. So we ask people to leave 2 feet of line and to give us a call, or to give their local turtle rescue group a call. And often we can do something with it, where it's simpler hooks I'm able to remove myself. Hooks that are a little bit deeper down we'll take to our veterinarians, and they will do surgery if needed. So those are hooks. This year we saw a lot of hooks. We also unfortunately see plastic, and a colleague just made a comment at a recent conference I was asked, saying it's no longer whether they eat plastic, it's how much. There's so much plastic in the environment. And Limapalooza on the left was a Kemp's Ridley turtle last year that came in because he swallowed a hook. I was able to get the hook out, but a couple of days later, volunteers came and grabbed me and said, "Hey, there's something purple coming out of his back end." And unfortunately, it was a balloon. And that balloon eventually came out with 2 feet of plastic ribbon. Thankfully, neither the ribbon nor the balloon itself impacted, but that's a common problem with plastic and with balloons. It will cause an impaction. It will basically block up their digestive tract, and turtles with heavy blockage can't survive. And Fuzzy Wuzzy on the right was not a bear. He was a green sea turtle. And at one point, we deal with a lot of poop at my work. Volunteers came to me with a little jar or container of poop, and they said, "Hey, look, there's something weird in this poop." And it turned out it was plastic. So over the next 21 days, almost every day, not quite every day, but he defecated a total of 14 grams of plastic. And that is the equivalent, just to give you an example, if you think of a credit card, 14 grams is approximately the equivalent of 3 credit cards. So this turtle had that much plastic in his digestive tract. Boat strike, we do see occasional boat strikes. We had some very serious ones this year. Some of them are able to be rehabilitated, some of them are not. And so these are some of the saddest cases I see. When the boat strike impacts the spine, there's really nothing that you can do. But we do what we can for those that we can. And one of the recommendations here is if you have a boat and if you're in an area with sea turtles or manatees, to just get a prop guard that works really well at protecting these turtles. And otherwise, even on the water, wear polarized glasses so that you can see if there's an animal in the way of your boat. We see occasionally turtles that get caught up and entrained in dredges. So we have dredges offshore to pull up sand to renourish our beaches. And sometimes even despite grills and grates over the dredging end, a turtle will get sucked into it. And that's effectively like getting sucked in a vacuum cleaner hose that's filled with sand. So they're scoured. Another thing that happens, which I know each and every one of you can appreciate, is they get not quite the bends, but they do get a condition similar to the bends with, they can get bubbles in their blood and things like that. And it can cause severe injury or severe impact. So Shamrock was a turtle 2 summers ago, little Kemp's Ridley, missing most of the skin on his carapace, most of the covering, and was in an oxygen chamber for several days. Not a pressurized, we don't have that, but the turtles are also able to handle changes in pressure a little bit better than we can. But he did turn around, and as you can see, he's a very feisty turtle, and we were able to release her back out to the wild. So over the years, we have admitted, this year we just admitted our 1,300th sea turtle just a few weeks ago. And we care for an increasing number every year. Most of we have 2 peaks through the year, one kind of in the December, January timeframe with the cold stuns, and then a lower peak, but more spread out in the late spring and early summer. And those are our boat strikes usually, and our hook and entanglement cases. Most of our turtles we see coming from our local counties. We do occasionally get turtles from out of state, including Massachusetts, where they have an annual cold stun event. So we open our doors and open our tanks for turtles in that area. And then I mentioned a few of the different human reasons for stranding. About 25%, if you count in boat strike, dredge and hook and entanglement, about 24% of turtles come in for human interaction. So with our impacting these turtles, it's also important to do what we can to help. So a turtle comes in and we do take a variety of diagnostics in order to examine them. Our vet, we work with North Carolina State University and the Center or their College of Veterinary Medicine. Our lead vet is located an hour and a half more north in Morehead City. And we do a lot of telemedicine, and then we have veterinarians that visit once a month, and we can also take turtles either to Raleigh or to Morehead City. And any given day, we'll be preparing a variety of diets for our turtles. And the green turtles, after they get their protein for a meal, they get vegetables or seaweed for desserts. So this is a fun look into our kitchen. Excuse me. And then our volunteers do a lot of cleaning. So we're always cleaning to make sure that we have the best and the cleanest possible facility to promote health in our turtles. We have to make our own water. Our current hospital is located far enough away from the ocean that we can't pull in salt water. So we actually make hundreds of gallons of water every day so that when we change out the tanks, we can have clean salt water. Once a week on the turtles, we will weigh and measure them so that we can keep track of their growth And we also do that when they first come in and before they're released. And release is, of course, what we're all our goal, what we're working towards. So these are either public events with thousands of people sometimes, or we will send them out just kind of quietly on a stealth release. But we love to see those turtles go back into the ocean. And for us, and a lot of people at our center, but I'm guessing probably a lot of you in the room too. Sea turtles are really important, kind of on a personal level, but they're also really important on an ecosystem level as well. They serve as a what's called a keystone species. So within the ecosystem and the food web of the ocean, they actually have some very important roles. And as a keystone species, that means that a lot of what they do impacts the environment. So, for example, if that turtle, if we're taken out of the habitat, then it could cause the habitat to become imbalanced and cause some serious ecological problems. So, for example, this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but green turtles will graze on seagrass, and actually that grazing helps to promote a healthier seagrass bed. As indicator species, this term basically means that what happens to a sea turtle happens to all of us. You know, that fuzzy wuzzy who had 14 grams of plastic, you know, every time we eat a fish, every time, you know, in some cases, every time we breathe, because now there's microplastic in the air and in the water, we are also ingesting plastic. And one study in the Mediterranean actually used sea turtles to measure the amount of plastic that was in the ocean of the Mediterranean Sea. And there's also this concept of One Health. So that concept basically means that human health, if you imagine interlocking circles or a Venn diagram, if you imagine 3 circles with human health and ocean and environmental health or ocean health and animal health, they all overlap and they all impact each other. So what we learn about sea turtles can also impact what we know about kids or about human health and human medicine. And one example is that when in learning more about osteoarthritis and this condition that happens that we see in turtles after a cold stun event, this condition also happens in children with hypothermia. So when we learn more about this condition in turtles so that we can help the turtles, we also, the findings can be important on a different level for people. Turtles are symbols of conservation. How many of you saw that turtle with a straw up its nose through some of your social media channels? Yeah, I call it the straw herd around the world. On the right is another picture that I've seen frequently in my social feeds of a 6-pack ring. Now, a lot of companies are going towards biodegradable rings or no rings at all. So that's been a positive. And here, at least, we're also seeing a lot of our local restaurants are either only offering straws on request, getting alternatives to straws, paper, biodegradable plastic, and things like that. And sea turtles help inspire youth. There's so many kids that come through that are just really, really excited about sea turtles. On the left was a recent education day that we had where we offered schools to come in for free. And that's our volunteer talking at the plastic station. And on the right is our group of summer interns from this year with our dear founder, Jane Beasley. So there are so many things that you can do to help. And sometimes it feels hopeless. And I'm sure you feel this too. You know, if you go to a dive spot and, you know, you find trash in the water, that's really not what you go there to see and to enjoy. But I like to think of it like local in 3 levels, like personal responsibility, community responsibility, and global responsibility. And on a personal level, you know, I can recycle, I can try to conserve electricity. do what I can to monitor my temperature, use reusable bags, use a reusable straw. And all these things can really add up and make a difference. If you get a cup of coffee every morning, think about what a difference, like on a single day, well, it's just one cup, one lid. But at the end of a year, and that's, 365 or 250 if you go just the work days, cups of coffee, and start to pile those up, and that becomes really meaningful that you brought your reusable mug and you saved that many cups from going in the landfill. In a community level, you can pick up litter. There are some really cool, before here I worked in Massachusetts, and the local dive clubs had these great underwater cleanups, and I think that's one of the really coolest things that I know divers do, whether or not it's a formal thing, but I know a lot of divers who just will carry around a bag, and you might intend to pick up some cool shells or something, but often I'm sure that you come back with, a can that you found or a bottle that you found on the bottom of the ocean. So that's a really a thing that you can do. And then globally, do what you can to support organizations, vote, use your economic votes, buy products that are better for the environment. And that's all I got. So I am more than happy to take questions, and I'm grateful for the chance to speak with you tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. So I had a couple questions going through. We're just coming off Shark Week, and so of course they're tracking everything. So when you were talking about the lost years and then being sort of out in the Sargassum Sea, are there any types of GPS trackers that you're attaching as turtles come out of the nests to be able to get some data about the lost years of kind of where are they, similar to what they're doing with sharks?
Yeah, with the hatchlings, now these turtles are only like this big. They're the size of the palm of your hand, maybe.
A little tracker.
So they're for the longest time there wasn't really anything that you could do, but electronically. But there were a number of studies. There was a study that, or there were some scientists for a while that were implanting a little, it's called a coded wire. So before we really had microchips, they were implanting something that could be read, but then you had to get that turtle again. They were also looking at, there's something called a living tag. And so they were taking, here's my prop. They were taking a little piece of the turtle's plastron or undershell, which is lighter in color, and transplanting it to the carapace, and then vice versa, so that if that turtle came back, and again, you have to actually see the turtle again, but that they could tell that it was a turtle, and they had the location coded too. But I am starting to see and hear more about different technology that is allowing a certain amount of tags. So I'm thinking that we're getting closer to being able to study those lost years. Kelly had a question, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Yes, I had some questions. Thank you. And first, I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. It's great. I spend some time each year on the beach at Nag's Head, and I recently noticed on the pier the poster that you showed with the the QR code for the fishermen to be able to call you. And I wish I had seen that before, because a couple of years ago, I saw this very large turtle on the beach, dead, and its head had been removed. And so I'm just wondering if you have any idea. I mean, at the time, I had no idea. Was that something that happened to the turtle and that's why it was beached? Or had the turtle been beached and some person cut off its head? Or like, do you have any idea what could have happened there? Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes groups that are responding to strandings, stranded dolphins, for example, or seals or turtles might collect the head in order to do their different studies and also to collect the data. But usually in those cases, they will actually bury the carcass so that nobody comes across it like you did.
Yeah.
You know, I am aware that you know, sometimes if a turtle is caught in a net or that sometimes they'll be sliced out of it. So that could have happened. You know, those are two possibilities.
Yeah, it was very sad because it was obviously a very mature turtle.
Yeah, that is hard because, like, I mean, the statistics for turtles really sound dismal. That's why I don't like presenting them. But you know, when there's this huge mortality in their first year, but by the time a turtle gets to that size, really
Yeah.
their biggest danger is people.
Yeah. And then another question for you is that, you know, as a diver, I have trouble knowing for sure whether I'm looking at a green or a loggerhead turtle. Is it the shape of the beak that's the biggest difference? Or, you know, can you flip back to pictures or point out the differences so that I can be more competent at telling those two apart?
Yeah, let me scroll back. Oh, I'm sorry. I had a lot of slides. I apologize.
Oh, it was a great presentation.
Well, clearly I love talking about it. All right. So it's probably not the best identification pictures, but yeah, there are some good diagrams online, but just to show you here. So loggerheads will have a little bit more of a prominent beak, and their head is going to be noticeably thick. It's going to be really thick. They're more brownish in color, kind of orangey brown. Now, green turtles, greens and hawksbills have some of the most striking shells. So whereas loggerheads, as they age, the shells will often get less patterned, but the greens have amazing patterns on their shell. And greens are going to have a much more blunt nose because they're grazing on the seagrass. So a loggerhead is more, you know, they have that giant mouth so that they can crush a whelk or a conch and other types of seafood. Another.
I misspoke. It's hawksbill and loggerhead that I was trying to say. I'm having trouble because they both seem to have the pointed beak and.
Okay, gotcha. So a hawksbill, one really easy way is, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but their scoots overlap. The hawksbill is more pointed than the loggerhead. The hawksbill has a thinner, let's see. The hawksbill has a thinner neck.
Right.
And they're going to have a much more patterned shell, and they're going to have sharp points on their marginal scoots, whereas a loggerhead is going to have more rounded marginal scoots. They're going to have much thicker neck, and the scoots are the plates on the top of their shell. The number of scoots varies by species, but I never remember what's what. So I usually go more by the look. A loggerhead is also going to be visibly bigger. So an adult loggerhead is going to get up to 300, 350 pounds. And that hawksbill is only going to be 100 to like 150, 200 pounds.
Okay.
And I haven't really seen that many hawksbills. Actually, I don't know if I have seen a hawksbill, but except through pictures and posts from divers and stuff like that. But it's really those marginal scoots that I look at, and the overlapping scoots on their carapace. and the pattern of their shell.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The saw edge on the back of the hawk's bill is a key part.
Yeah. Yeah, right there.
I have a question regarding the temperatures and the sex of the turtles. Are you doing, or does anyone do anything to, if we have a whole bunch of females and not enough males, are they doing anything to cool down nesting sites or anything like that? Or would that totally ruin things ecologically as well?
Sorry, the now I can see. That's a really great question, and you prefaced it well. I mean, I think you almost answered it for me. Scientists and managers are starting to talk about ways to cool down nests or to ensure a more kind of an equitable ratio. I think a normal ratio is like 60-40 females to males, give or take. Now that's one reason why any nesting in North Carolina and presumably up in Virginia as well, the same conditions would occur. Our sand is just a little bit cooler than Florida. So we're hopefully producing, adding more males to the population. But there are some strategies that they're starting to use in certain areas. And one is relocating the nests to a hatchery and either shading the hatchery so that they're just in the shade. I mean, you still have the outside temperature, but they don't have that direct sun, or like sprinkling water on it, or both. So that's kind of the main strategy. Where we have more of our nests in situ, our state sea turtle stranding coordinator or biologist has mentioned that some research here where nests, we've had a couple of nests that have been impacted by sprinklers on lawns or something. And those nests apparently turn into more males, which makes sense. So, there's the possibility that in another 10 years, we'll be asked as part of our beach duties to, establish some sort of sprinkler system and kind of water down the nests periodically. But those are two of the strategies that are being talked about.
How do you go about actually determining the gender ratios in a given nest?
Yeah, and that's a great question too. The gender ratios in a nest, honestly, it's really hard. I mean, at the hospital, we don't know unless if a turtle is an adult, we know if they're male or female. So those turtle swimming by you when you're diving, if you can see the tail, it's probably a male. So a male's tail will extend beyond the rear flippers. A female's tail will be mostly hidden under its shell, under its carapace. But they don't develop that until they are subadults. So, until they're nearing adulthood. So any juveniles that you see aren't gonna do that, aren't gonna tell. The studies that are looking at gender in the nest are currently, I mean, I think back when it was acceptable, they may have been sacrificing certain nests, but currently there are people, this is really cool. There are people who are doing research where they can take just a drop of blood from a hatchling and analyze the DNA and figure out whether or not that's a male or a female. So in those cases, they would collect the hatchlings when they hatch instead of letting them get down to the ocean right away. They'll process them, and the scientists who are doing this have gotten really good and really quick, but they'll process them, and usually in order to maximize that benefit and that turtle from being basically maximize the scientific benefit that turtle is donating to us effectively. But they'll take a drop of blood for DNA analysis. They'll take weights and measurements, and then when night comes, then they'll release them back, and they'll still let them walk on the sand because that's how they're imprinting. But then you have to actually run the genetics on that blood sample. So at the hospital, we don't pay for a DNA test. We don't, except if we're in the rare case where we are placing a turtle, a juvenile turtle. That's the only case I'm aware of where we actually ran a DNA blood test to see whether or not it was male or female, because that would matter as that turtle grew. But yeah, there's some amazing things. And when you think about taking a drop of blood on a little baby hatchling that's the size of the palm of your hand, I don't know how to do it, how they do it.
You mentioned, being out with towels and all to sort of block the light, to guide them towards the ocean. Is there anything that your group's doing when a nest hatches to help deflect predators or anything else for enhancing their chances of at least getting to the water?
So if a nest hatches during the day, there are more predators out in the form of seagulls. And so we will generally, we call it bucketing. We'll put the hatchlings in a bucket covered with a cool cloth, and we might even take them and into the hospital for a few hours until it gets dark. And then once it's dark, we'll take them back out to the beach, back out to the nest right where they were hatched. And we'll actually, we already have the ramp, so we'll smooth out a path, and we'll put them down on that path and basically let them go into the ocean. Now, natural predators also include crabs. So even though sand crabs here in our area. So I think most of us, I don't know if we're officially allowed to or supposed to do this, but most of us will, if we see a sand crab, we'll kind of like toss it down the beach a little bit. We won't let that get to the little baby. I know crabs have to eat too, but there's plenty of junk that people leave on the beach there. And
Sand crabs aren't endangered.
Thank you. Sand crabs aren't endangered. We don't kill them, we don't hurt them, but we will take them down the beach. And once in the water, they're really on their own, but we're looking at those predators we can access. As far as human predators, obviously if there's any kind of dog or cat or anything like that, we would definitely keep them away from the hatchlings. And we do put it's just a grate with pretty large, it's a large opening, but we'll put a grate down over the nest, and that helps deter those bigger predators. We've been having a real problem with coyotes now on one of our nests, and some of the other islands in North Carolina are starting to have an increasing problem with coyotes. And we've tried, like for a while, there's a capsicum or pepper or something to detract some of those larger predators, but that wasn't working on this nest. So we actually bought some wolf urine, sprinkled it around the nest, and that has been keeping the coyotes away. They haven't been digging into it, but there's a couple that have been the pups have been playing on the nest, as we know from the tracks that we see. So that seems to be telling them to head down the beach a little bit. So there in other parts, there have been increasing problems, even in other parts of the state, with coyotes. There's some more intense predator exclusion in some areas that people have developed. And south of us, they're starting to have a problem with armadillos digging up the nest. And armadillos are moving north, so we may have to protect against those too. So yeah, we try to do what we can to keep what's practical and not too damaging to at least the members of the environment that should be part of that ecosystem, but still protecting those turtles.
Bobby, you have a question?
I just wondered if they could take a lantern out and lead them to the ocean when they go astray. If you're gonna,
Did you hear the question?
Yeah,
You could take a lantern to to guide the lost boys.
You are spot on. So when we have those extreme light situations like the one I was mentioning that really made an impact on me, the reason that most of the turtles actually made it down was that we have somebody, we call it playing the moon. So we'll take, usually white lights are, we're not even allowed our cell phones on the beach because even that the light from the screen can impact. But we all are the lead volunteers who are in charge of that nest will have a flashlight that can be turned to white in addition to red. And we'll put it in a white, like a painter's, a 5-gallon bucket. So the light is somewhat muted. Put a white light in there and stand over the ocean. And so we play the moon and it works. Often the turtles will go that way. We still have to kind of try to shade any other lights, but when we have more distant lights, like from piers and stuff, that seems to work pretty well.
Great. And yeah, Michael.
When you were showing lifespans of the different species, they all seem to be like under 100 years. I used to see years ago programs where they would say, oh, we estimate this sea turtle is 200 years old. Do we just know more, or there are occasional outliers who have extreme longevity?
I think both. So yeah, I used to, I mean, and when I first started this work, with turtles 18 years ago and trying to do educational programs, the data I was finding, the best data at that time was just lifespan unknown. And I was hearing things like that all over the map. These lifespan estimates I've looked up fairly recently within the last couple of years on reputable sites like NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And so that is what several sources publish currently, with the caveat that nobody really knows. We have, well, one thing we like to say, so that nest that I mentioned with the the grandma, the mom and the daughter all laying eggs on the same island on Topsail. Well, if you think about it, if that loggerhead turtle was 35 years, if grandma was 35 when she had her first nest, and then mama was 35 when she had her first nest, and then daughter was 35 when she had her first nest, if all three of those turtles were nesting on Topsail Island, then grandma has to be at least, close to 95, 100 years old, or more. So, that's kind of our, it's probably more often for not all the turtles, but some turtles. But one really amazing thing about turtles is they can go on laying eggs for their entire lifespan. So they don't go into senescence. They can continue to lay eggs.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much, Kathy, for joining us tonight. Amazing presentation, very informative. And I know at least my assistant here tonight, turtles are her favorite, and several people in the room. So thank you very much. Great information. Always fun to learn something more about them and what we can do to help. So
well, thank you. I love speaking with people who also love sea turtles. So, and you're out there, they're seeing them all the time. So please, if you do have a trip that brings you near Surf City, get in touch. I'd be happy to take you on a private tour of our hospital and show you around. And in the meantime, happy diving.
well, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. And just a reminder, we have Diver Day on August 19th. Give the shop a call this week to get on the manifest if you want to come down. Our next meeting is September 13th. Back here, Jim Elliott, who is the president and founder of Dive Heart, an adaptive scuba organization. He's going to be our speaker talking about what Dive Heart does. Ahead of that, I'll send out. There was a documentary that they did last year that is adapting to dive. It's available on Amazon. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful story about not only the filmmakers' journey in making the story, but also about what Dive Heart does. So that'll give you a little bit of a preview of what Jim and his organization does. But we'll see you back here next month, September 13th. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Happy diving.